you could say early perimenopause, and then what late perimenopause would look like.
This is the reason why I want to start with early perimenopause, is that this is the part of the transition that is often dismissed. This is where we're telling women that they can't be in perimenopause because they're still cycling, although your cycle may shift a bit.
What would you say is the first step somebody should take if that is the same wall they keep running into? Like, how do you approach it in your practice?
Happens in this window of vulnerability really sets the tone for the next 40 years. And that's what my book is about, The Perimenopause Revolution, is let's connect the dots between your symptoms, which are signals, very important signals, and your future health outcomes. You're still in a thermogenic state. You're still in a fat-burning state after lunch. You probably have a little bit of some time after that meal to go and take a walk. So have your lunch, have a metabolically healthy lunch that's focused on protein and fiber. If you're going to do dessert, have a little dessert on the back end, whatever that may be.
Big topic right now that you're seeing everywhere is women in perimenopause and taking peptides.
Start with the foundation, lock in the foundation, and then upgrade to hormone replacement therapy. And then once you get that stack dialed, then I would step into the world of peptides. So that would be my stack. Foundation first, then HRT, and then peptides.
Dr. Mariza Snyder, welcome back to the show. You were actually on my show, gosh, I think it was the first year of the podcast. It's so wild to think how much has changed. I know back then we were talking about essential oils. That was your passion and your expertise. And I'm sure you integrate that now in what you do today. But today's conversation I was mentioning offline is literally, I feel not only do I relate to, of course you relate to, but so many women need this today. And I'm just so happy I'm bringing on you to talk about the perimenopause revolution that we are entering. And also you have a new book that is coming out. So welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Yes, I am so grateful that not only is menopause having a moment, but perimenopause is also having a moment. And they are in their own right. They really deserve their own moment. And so I'm excited we're going to dive into that today.
Yeah. Okay. So as we know, and we were kind of talking about, is so many people are in this stage of life, perimenopause, and there's a lot of changes going on. They're not sure really what's going on, but they're noticing something is not the same and things that I was doing previously weren't working. So what really is happening in this time and the common age that we're in when this does happen?
Ooh, I love this question. And this is the question I get all of the time. Erica, honey, this is a full body remodel. And hopefully, depending on how we decide we want to rewrite our midlife story, it's an upgrade. Although I will tell you, in the moment, in the transition, it doesn't always feel like an upgrade. It feels like chaos. So I want to reverse engineer really quickly so we get a sense of what's going on with perimenopause. I think we all know that menopause, technically, how we define it is it's one day in time where we haven't had a period for 12 consecutive months. But we don't just arrive there. There is a transition to get there. And the reason why I call it your second puberty is like your first puberty, which happens, for a lot of girls around like between 11, 12 years old, give or take. And what a lot of us didn't realize, I know for me, Erica, no one told me that when I was in puberty, it was going to be like a 4 to 6 year transition as hormones were coming online. So hormones are radically fluctuating. The brain does a massive remodel. And I would really argue that it's a massive upgrade in puberty. A lot of what we're letting go of when we are our younger years, we're getting an upgraded brain as we step into our reproductive years. So then we go into our reproductive years and we're cycling consistently every single month ideally, that's what we're going. It's what's happening. I know that there's menstrual cycle issues that women can have when they're reproductive years, but ideally for like 25 to 30 plus years. And then we only have so many eggs. And so it's in that like I would say mid to late 30s that the body knows this. The ovaries know this. The brain knows this. We have about 10,000 eggs left at this point. And, when we think about pregnancy kind of after the age of 35, we think about those kind of late reproductive years because we know that there's only so many eggs. And as a result, the communication between the brain is like playing telephone with a 5-year-old. It becomes really garbled between And as a result, we see those hormone fluctuations kind of similar to your first puberty, but now in reverse. Instead of ascending into reproductive years, we are descending out of the reproductive years. And this transition can start as early as our mid to late 30s, last anywhere between 4 and 10 plus years. And because hormones are erratically declining, because that's ultimately what's going on, there's no balancing hormones during this phase. It's what's important to know that there's a lot that we can do and that there is a way through. But as a result, like you said, a lot of the things that we used to do when our hormones were rhythmically cycling was very predictable, kind of that same level of predictability is kind of out the window. And so we have to level up our care and support. But if we do that, it can be a much smoother transition.
Amazing. I think it's great to lay down the foundation of really what is happening. So if you could kind of explain, I know you briefly talked about our hormones are shifting, but what is actually happening in this time as we, I guess you could say early perimenopause, and then what late perimenopause would look like?
Yes. So let's start with that early perimenopause. This is the reason why I want to start with early perimenopause is that this is the part of the transition that is often dismissed. This is where we're telling women that they can't be in perimenopause because they're still cycling. Although your cycle may shift a bit, like maybe instead of a 29-day cycle or 28-day cycle, it's now 26 days. You notice a little bit of spotting in that luteal phase of your cycle. So there may be cycle changes, but there, again, with lifing, Erica, sometimes we don't notice it. And let's be honest, even in our reproductive years, our cycles can be off, some months out of the year, versus others. But we'll notice menstrual cycle changes. But a lot of times doctors will tell you you're too young because you have a cycle. Be lucky you have a cycle. And that it must be stress or just aging, or you're a mom. It's always like some type of gaslighting that's happening. And that's because a lot of the symptoms are brain-related symptoms that happen in early peri. And the number one reason for this is progesterone. So progesterone is our progestation hormone. And the only way that we make it is through ovulation. I always say that ovulation is the main event. I don't know why periods, the shedding of the uterus, became the main event when the only way that we really do that well is when we ovulate. Right? That's the whole point. We are one of the only species on the planet that prepare for pregnancy, whether we like it or not, every single month in our reproductive years, right? That's how we're built. So whether you're trying to get pregnant or not, your body's like, let's prime up. And as a result, on the back end of that ovulation, we have progesterone. What a lot of people don't realize, I just interviewed one of my dear friends, Dr. Sarah Hill. She has a book called The Period Brain. And what a lot of us don't realize is that on the back end of ovulation, when progesterone rises, it is very metabolically active because your body is acting as if it may be pregnant every single month. And so it requires more energy, it requires more calories, it requires more mitochondrial function. It's no wonder in our luteal phase, we want to go more inward. We're not like vibrant and alive, and we want to go out and play and do big projects. This is in a lot of ways, our body was like, okay, let's hunker down because maybe you're pregnant, girl. So what women will notice in early perimenopause, the symptoms are cyclical. That progesterone, because we're skipping ovulation some of those months, isn't showing up, or it's starting to decline. So as a result, we know that progesterone is a neurosteroid. Estrogen is too. Estrogen is the CEO of the brain, but progesterone specifically is a neurosteroid called allopregnanolone, or allo for short. And what we know about allopregnanolone is that it's helping to calm the nervous system, particularly by activating the GABA A receptors. And when we think about GABA, we think about the calming, the brakes of the nervous system. It's the calming hormone. It's the sleep hormone. It's the let's reduce the overwhelm and anxiety hormone. And when progesterone doesn't show up, there's a new research study that just came out that for women, GABA levels decline significantly faster than men. And it's because of this relationship with lowered levels of progesterone if we don't mitigate it. And so we'll notice in the beginning of perimenopause, low stress tolerance. We don't have the same level of high functioning. I don't know about you, but I'm on my computer. There's about 50 tabs open right now. And, in my reproductive years, before like perimenopause really hit, I could handle all the tabs. effortlessly. I could handle all the to-do list, all the things that were happening. I could easily multitask. I could be at a high level of executive function and just handle all of it. But then in peri, as we start to lose this hormonal resilience and it affects all areas of the brain is massively remodeling. We're noticing that our executive function isn't the way that it used to be. We're more irritable, especially the late part of our cycle. We have low stress tolerance. Our sleep begins to have issues. Our PMS symptoms become more stretched. So that's what early peri can look like. Also, less workout recoveries. You start to notice weight resistance in this part of the phase. And then in late perimenopause, and this is what doctors always assumed was perimenopause. If you look up the CDC, it says that perimenopause happens at aged 47. But a lot of women, again, it's happening way earlier than that. And I think it always was. It's a combination between definitely there's nothing about this modern day world that leads to optimized hormones. So that's definitely happening. And number two, we were gaslighting women. We were telling women that perimenopause was late 40s, early 50s only, and that it was hot flashes, night sweats, low libido, vaginal dryness, and maybe some sleep issues. And if you didn't have any of those things, it couldn't have been perimenopause. And so, I've asked, I've asked women, like mother-in-law and other women in my life, I'm like, did you remember going through perimenopause? You're like, oh, they said, no, I didn't have hot flashes. I didn't have night sweats. And I was like, well, there's 40 symptoms, including prediabetes and all these things that can happen in perimenopause that we just didn't know were peri. But the way that we distinguish late peri is you are skipping periods now for more than 60 days. And now we're talking crime scene periods. We're talking hot flashes. We're talking night sweats. We're talking vaginal dryness, general urinary symptoms of menopause, UTIs, incontinence. Those are the kind of things that start popping up in late perimenopause. And let me tell you, Erica, those are impossible to miss, girl. You can't write those off as something else. That is not stress. That is not being a mom. That is a full body hormone takeover.
Wow. I think one of the things you mentioned as far as the early perimenopause that I think is really important that I started doing probably maybe a year ago is tracking my cycle.
Yes.
And that was one of the things that I feel like I experienced my perimenopause this last year. Like I started to notice things, just being aware. One of the things I first noticed is my cycle shortened a little bit. And so that was the big thing. So I think the only way we really know that is tracking it. So I think that's...
What's a day or two?
You wouldn't notice.
You wouldn't notice. That's how I knew. I officially diagnosed myself with peri because it doesn't, as you know, Erica, it doesn't announce itself. I think like, I'm here. Hello. There's no test. There's no, your follicular stimulating hormone isn't changing yet. Not until your late 40s, unless you're working with a fertility practitioner, where we're really scrutinizing over hormone levels. We don't really see a lot of change. Like a snap in time, you go to your doctor, you ask for hormone panels. I will tell you that when I knew I was in peri, my hormone levels, I just kept catching a really great day. I was like, they look good, but I know I'm in it. And the only way I knew, because it's a clinical diagnosis based on symptoms, I was tracking my symptoms along with my cycle. And a follicular phase, still doing pretty good. Luteal phase, I was tanking. I felt like hot garbage. And so, in some months were better than others. And that's the other thing about peri. Some months you're good. And then other months your sleep is horrible. And it'll always be, again, those 14 days after ovulation, if you ovulate. You got to be tracking that. I'm not suggesting every woman track to see if they're ovulating every month in peri. I don't know if that's necessary, but track your symptoms against your cycle. You'll notice patterns. And I think it's also worth running labs as well. But note that the way that we really diagnose peri is with symptoms. And the number one thing that women will tell me is that they don't feel like themselves anymore. They're like, something isn't right. I don't know what it is, but I don't feel like myself. And if they're in their late 30s, early 40s, I'm like, okay, this is early perimenopause.
Yeah. And I think that's where women are being gaslit in the medical community is they feel like something's off. They go get their blood work checked and everything per se seems normal, but they're like, well, I don't feel normal. I'm not the same, not sleeping. I have brain fog. Like the list goes on. So what would you say is the first step somebody should take if that is the same wall they keep running into? Like, how do you approach it in your practice?
I love this question because so many women are going to their doctors. Just a couple stats to share. It takes an average of 5 to 6 visits for women to finally get their symptoms connected to perimenopause or menopause. That's number one. And that is unreasonable. That's outrageous. So I just want to, we desperately need to do better for women when they're going through this transition, because what happens in this window of vulnerability really sets the tone for the next 40 years. And that's what my book is about, The Perimenopause Revolution, is let's connect the dots between your symptoms, which are signals, very important signals, and your future health outcomes. And so what I would do is I would even call your doctor first, your primary or your OB-GYN, and say, hey, are you taking care of patients in perimenopause and menopause? Can we even have a conversation about hormone replacement therapy? Just call the team and see, because it may not even be worth the copay. You know what I'm saying? Like, you may just have to be like, you know what? This is not the conversation I need to have with you. Like, my primary I have a primary and an OB-GYN. I run labs. We have really great insurance, particularly because I have a 4-year-old. So in order for him to have great insurance, all of us have to have the same insurance. And I'm like, well, if I'm paying for it, I might as well get something out of it. And so they run labs and they do all the things. They run most of the labs that I want. I usually go out of pocket for some of those labs, but I'm not having the HRT conversation with my OB-GYN. I'm not, she's not the one. And so I recommend if you make the phone call first and see if they're even taking care of women. You have to understand that right now, only 30% of OB-GYNs get any level of menopause care, let alone perimenopause care in residency. So it's still very low. It's going to change, but it's going to take it would take at least a decade or so for that to change. What I would do is, if you're looking particularly for HRT support, or you're looking for practitioners or providers in your area that are taking care of women specifically with menopausal care or perimenopausal care in mind, call your nearest compounding pharmacist. Who is prescribing HRT? Who is compounding testosterone for their patients? Then get the names and numbers of those doctors. If that doesn't work and you're looking for kind of a more affordable, more accessible way, I would go to one of the telemedicine clinics that are national. MIDI Health, My Alloy, Joy Wellness.
Joy.
Some of them will do labs like Joy, and I think MIDI does as well. My Alloy does not. It's very much more traditional type of HRT, very, very conventional, and they're just running symptoms. Which, again, if you don't want to spend the money on the labs, you want to just base on symptoms, it's important to note that with some of these companies, it's very cookie cutter. So you're going to get the lowest dose of everything a lot of the time. And I will tell you that HRT is not a one size fits all. And so if you are going to be working with some of these companies, you're going to have to still very much advocate for yourself, or find one of the companies that will run labs and are going to be much more involved in your care plan, and that they're willing to pivot your care plan. Because I will tell you, now that I've been on HRT for almost 3 years, I have shifted and played with my dosage, application, all kinds of things. Especially in perimenopause, the one thing I can guarantee is that your body is going to constantly be changing.
Right.
Perimenopause at 43 is not perimenopause at 46. And perimenopause at 46 is not perimenopause at 50. They are very different because your hormones are very different throughout this journey. And so just note that you're going to need to be working with providers who understand that nuance and who are willing to not just build a cookie cutter protocol for you.
So useful. I think that's so informative, because I do think that you have to be an advocate for yourself. And so if one person's like, okay, this is your dose and you're going to stay on this forever, blah, blah, blah. It's not, like you said, it's not the same for everybody. But before we go deeper into HRT, because I think that's a big topic, I want to talk about holistically how we can support this transition, because I believe lifestyle, there is a lot of things we could do. I know you talk about this in your book, the pillars that really support us during this time. So what are some of those that we could lay out right now that holistically could help us?
So, Erica, I don't know exactly the entire demographic, but let's say that women listening to the show are stepping into peri, maybe in your late 30s or your mid 30s, and you're like, I want to really get ready. I want to prime up. And mind you, the same things that I'm recommending for supporting you through perimenopause will allow you to move through this transition much earlier. But also, a lot of the same things I'm talking about here is also helping to extend your reproductive longevity,
Ooh,
which
that's good.
that's what I want.
Oh,
I want as much reproductive. Again, if natural menopause is between 45 and 55 years old, I want to shove it back as far as possible. Like I want to get to 55. That is the goal. And I also want to make it really clear that even though I'm on HRT has not been the biggest needle mover for me.
hmm.
It's a great optimizer, but lifestyle medicine is the key. We can never, that's why the bulk of my book, although I have a chapter on hormone replacement therapy so that you have enough knowledge to have a conversation with your provider, I want you to know it's the lifestyle medicine that is going to be the ultimate through line for how you feel during this transition, but also how it sets you up for your future health outcomes. So the first thing I talk about in the book is really your metabolic health, the silent shifts. Because at the end of the day, we know that women spend 25% more of their lives in debilitating health than men. And that happens in postmenopause. We also know that more women than men die of heart disease. 1 in 3 women will die of a heart attack or stroke. More women than men have diabetes. More women than men have dementia. It's in this window of vulnerability, this window of opportunity that a lot of this is setting the tone. For
Right.
so long, we have pretended like these hormones were not whole body hormones, that it was all bikini medicine, that is, it was only between the bikini lines that we were different or distinct from men. And yet, our health outcomes after menopause were significantly worse. The math wasn't mathing, Erica, at all. And so I always talk about cellular energy. One of our dear friends of ours is Dr. Casey Means, and it's really about having good energy. And what happens when these hormones decline is that our energy begins to falter. So it's no wonder women are struggling with brain related symptoms. It's no wonder we feel more fatigued. Our workout recovery isn't the same. We're putting on belly fat without permission, despite the fact that we're doing a lot of the same things that we did when there wasn't any belly fat. Like, what is going
Right.
on? And so I talk about the metabolic changes and how we can stay on top of those changes so that one, we feel good in our body, but also we protect our cardiometabolic health. So the first thing I talk a lot about, probably more at nauseum than anyone would love, is balancing blood sugar, protecting that cellular energy through the gut microbiome, through building our plates with metabolically healthy meals, moving after meals. How do we punctuate movement throughout our day so that we are feeling more alive, optimizing circadian rhythm and our sleep routines? Because let's be honest, sleep is very elusive due to that loss of progesterone and GABA, especially in early perimenopause. And it just keeps getting worse as we keep going. So I have a lot of sleep strategies in the book: community, mental health, managing our stress response system, and then again, that little topper, that little cherry topper optimizer of HRT. How do we bring that in to help us through? So when I talk about blood sugar management, it's really about building that plate, prioritizing protein and fiber. And if we had like a magical rule, it would be 25 grams of protein or more at every meal, 25 grams of fiber throughout the day, and adding in some healthy fats with every meal as well. And then reducing, obviously, the added sugar and being really mindful because, marketing is so tricky in the supermarket. I think
Oh,
about
yeah.
the drinks like the poppies and the kombuchas and all the healthy drinks, the prebiotics. And if you look at these drinks, the 5 grams or 4 grams or 6 grams, that adds up. So it's just being really intentional and mindful, even looking at the healthy items. What is the added sugar content of that? Just scrutinize that ingredient list. So I know for me, like being very mindful about the ingredients that go into the foods that we make has been a game changer. And this has been something that's been on top of mind, but it does require a bit more effort to really get clear on what are the foods that are going to feed your future brain and what are the foods that are going to silently, you know, uh, sabotage your metabolic health.
One thing I love, I think you mentioned this in the book as well, if I noted correctly, but I've also heard this myself, is when you have a carb never have it naked.
No,
And that
never have it
means
naked.
adding fat or protein with it. I think that's a simple hack because,
Yes.
again, fruit is healthy. I do think fruit is really great to have. And I tend to go for the low glycemic, but if you're having an apple, pair it with a nut, and I think that's a great strategy just to help mitigate the glucose spikes, which I love that.
Yes. And then move. Do some squats. After, I always say no naked carbs, but also, I would say no naked carbs and no dessert or even dessert breakfasts. So no dessert as a snack. So think protein bars. Think even protein pancakes can hit you. Like think about savory breakfasts. And if you're gonna have dessert, always have them on the back end of your meals. And then walk after that. And if there was if you wanted to know the prime time to have like a little dessert, it's gonna be after lunch. You're still in a thermogenic state. You're still in a fat burning state after lunch. You probably have a little bit of some time after that meal to go and take a walk. So have your lunch, have a metabolically healthy lunch that's focused on protein and fiber. If you're going to do dessert, have a little dessert on the back end, whatever that may be, and then go for a 15-minute walk or do some jump squats or do some squats or go up and down some stairs. I mean, that's going to help you mitigate. It's so much easier to have irregular blood sugar during perimenopause and menopause. We go into a default state of insulin resistance due to the fact that estrogen is declining. Estrogen is what's made us a bit more insulin sensitive. And so as estrogen is declining, and let's be honest, leading to 40, you've lived a life. And I will tell you, I grew up in the 80s. We didn't know any better. I ate a lot of ultra processed foods when I was a kid and probably even into my 20s, just not knowing.
Not knowing is.
And so all of that, now, mind you, did I clean up my act big time in my late 20s and my 30s? Absolutely, I did. And I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune condition, in my late 30s, which I've been on an autoimmune protocol since I was 38 years old and really leveraged that to get pregnant at 40 years old as well. So again, super clean diet. And I will tell you that I have noticed body composition changes. I have noticed, I've noticed shifts and changes even when insulin and blood sugar are still looking good. And so just note that as these hormones are shifting, we know that there's metabolic shifts that are happening, body composition changes that are happening, muscle that is default being lost in the process. And so it's important that we stay in front of all of this by really implementing. This is the through line of the entire book that I wrote, is how do we stay in front of these metabolic changes that are happening in perimenopause and menopause?
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned obviously food being the focus, sleep. Critical, critical, and then movement and what were the other ones you mentioned? The other pillars?
Stress and mental health, supporting your mental health and your brain health and community. When we look at the research, it's so hard to argue one that's more important than the other. Is the food more important than the sleep? Nothing's operating.
These are just pillars.
Yeah, is the movement,
tap into each pillar.
Exactly. Is the movement the panacea? And I would say that movement is very much up there. But again, movement is not going to fix a crappy diet.
Right.
Lock in the diet, make it so how we eat in my home, because we've been doing it for so long. It's just what we do. It's so second nature. It's how we build meals. My son and I were talking about why he's growing so fast. He's getting so tall. He's getting so big, and he's very lean. And he's like, Mama, why am I getting so tall? And I was like, because we feed your tummy bugs really healthy foods. We build a plate with nourishing protein and healthy fats. And we're the whole intention is to feed your body so that it's got the fuel to thrive. And that's how we talk about it in my household.
Love it.
And that's what we do. That's how we be in this household, And,
yeah.
And then, we make sure that we build in a lot of movement. And so I know that there's a lot of talk about movement being the thing right now. And I'm so grateful that movement is having a moment, because I think a lot of times what we've been telling women is that once we get to midlife, nothing's going to fix what we are going through. And we now know that there's so much that we can do, especially movement, especially strength training, especially walking after meals. But the number one researched thing that we can bring into our lives, the habit that will make the biggest change in terms of our longevity and our mortality, is going to be community. Having women that we get to do this journey with, having someone that we can connect with, that we can talk about our symptoms with, that we can walk this journey with. Community is the number one thing that is going to protect our longevity. But what I recommend is move with your women, go to yoga classes with your women, walk after a meal with your women, do walking calls with your people. I think that's where, when we're habit stacking, like my favorite habit stack is to go and grab an organic unsweetened matcha. I have an amazing little matcha place over down the street from us. And we're really close to the beach. We grab our matchas, we walk to the beach, and we just catch up, right? That's
perfect.
those are the three, like my favorite. I think about all the antioxidant benefits of a matcha, but just having a nice ritual of a beverage, being with your bestie, going for a walk, like it's the best longevity hack that I can offer on this podcast interview today.
I love that. And it's so great. Habit stacking is great. And I honestly think that's way better than sitting at a restaurant catching up.
Totally.
Yeah.
You could do that for a hot minute and then build in. I try to build in movement before the sit down or after the sit down.
Yeah.
Ideally, it's after the sit down because you're getting all the blood sugar balancing benefits. But sometimes, besties, we have to meet up before. But either way, a walk is built in to the experience.
I love that. So since we were talking about food, I think supplements is a good thing to touch on, because I think supplements could be so supportive during this time. So I'm just curious, which are your go-tos, especially for women in perimenopause?
So my non-negotiable supplements are going to be vitamin D. And you can test, don't guess, but I will tell you 98% of my midlife patients have low or suboptimal vitamin D levels. So I would test it first, but I don't think there's any harm in taking a couple thousand IUs of vitamin D every day. I typically, with my patients, it's between 4,000 and 5,000 IUs, because most of them, we need to bump it up. And I want to see lab ranges go back into range. Ideally, I want your vitamin D levels above 40, if not 50. So that's what I would love. A lot of my patients are in their 25s or 30s.
Wow.
Number 2 is going to be omegas. Again, I want to feed that brain. I want to reduce inflammation. So EPA, DHA, I want that. I typically recommend 2 grams, at least 1 gram of omegas every day, but 2 grams of omegas ideally. We want to protect your brain at all cost. Next is going to be magnesium glycinate. I know there's a lot of different magnesiums out there, but again, we want to calm that nervous system. Most of us need sleep support. I love magnesium threonate as well. I love magnesium malate, but magnesium glycinate seems to get the job done. And so I typically recommend magnesium glycinate before bed. I think it's a great, you could take it at any time of the day that you want, but I find that having a little sleep stack before bed can be really beneficial. That's a part of my sleep stack. I also take my omegas at night because I'm taking other supplements during the day. So that's a part of my sleep stack as well. If you're looking for sleep support, a little bit of melatonin. Again, we're losing melatonin and we're losing GABA at an alarming rate in perimenopause and menopause. And so I would start with 1 to 3 milligrams of melatonin, see how that helps. I have chronic migraines. I take up to 10 milligrams of melatonin for oxidative stress. So that's part of my migraine protocol. So note that you can kind of play with the melatonin and see what you can get away with, right? So 1 to 3 milligrams is usually where I would start. Things like L-theanine, passion flower, valerian root, find the sleep blend that works for you, or a sleep tea. I love creatine, somewhere between 5 and 7 grams a day. I mean, not only great for brain health, for sleep, especially if you're traveling a lot, but also muscle recovery and cognitive function. So creatine, easy to add to coffee people just drink it in water. They add it to smoothies, getting where you fit in. I love a good prebiotic and probiotic. You can often get them combined, and a digestive enzyme. Our gut health is also changing. Our gut microbiome is less diverse when we lose our hormones, particularly estrogen. So I want to make sure that your digestive system is working well. It starts with what you eat, but so often we need some more help. We need some more support there. And so find, whether it's a spore-based probiotic. I love Just Thrive. It's one of my favorite companies. And then, there's so many companies that make digestive enzymes. Consider a green drink, that just has everything in it. There's a lot of companies that sell green drinks. Kind of just make sure that you're kind of getting those antioxidants and micronutrients and those types of things I would recommend as well, especially just making it easy. Things like fulvic acid, humic acid, Bean Minerals is one of my favorite companies for this to help support overall mineral support. And then I'm trying to think, what else would I recommend? Something that's going to support, again, detox pathways, whether it's milk thistle or glutathione. Again, a lot more oxidative stress is being created during this time. A lot of people would argue, or scientists would argue, that perimenopause is a default inflammatory state, because when hormones are erratically binding to receptor sites, it does drive oxidative stress. Also, we have lower stress tolerance, so cortisol seems to be deregulated, which is also driving more oxidative stress. And so whether it's glutathione or more vitamin C, or it is, something that's supporting the liver, an NAC, a precursor, whatever is helping to support that cellular energy. So those would be my non-negotiables.
Okay.
Every single one of you are going to need different levels of support. For me, I need thyroid support because I have Hajis, so there's a different protocol for that. So again, figuring out what works best for you. If you're having blood sugar issues, I would consider berberine as well as something to bring in. So those would be my non-negotiables, especially based on some of the maybe some of the symptoms that you're dealing with.
Yeah, that was a great stack. I completely agree with all that. And then I know commonly we're hearing a lot about estrogen dominance and PCOS. And is this because we're declining in our hormones and they're just being thrown off balance? That's generally what's happening during this time.
I love that question. Well, polycystic ovarian syndrome can be, technically they can exist, they can coexist together, or they can be mutually exclusive. So polycystic ovarian syndrome, what we know for sure, we don't exactly know why it's created, but we know that 80% of women who have PCOS have metabolic dysfunction, insulin resistance. And so what I think is going on, if I could theorize based on the research that I've read, is that we are metabolically struggling. We have metabolic dysfunction. We know right now that 1 in 4 of our children have full-blown diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Crazy. 1 in 3 of our children have pre-diabetes. And then, a lot of our girls, 1 in 5 women will have polycystic ovarian syndrome. Many of them are developing it in their earlier years, I think teens and 20s. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that we have impaired glucose regulation and impaired metabolic health. When we think about reproductive health, it's one of the most metabolically driven processes of the body. And that shouldn't surprise each and every one of us, because in order to 3D print human beings, we need a lot of mitochondria and we need a lot of metabolic capacity. It takes so much energy to grow a human. But most importantly, it takes an insane amount of energy just to prime for a potential human every single month. And that is what your body is doing. And so if there's any level of impairment at the mitochondrial level or at the metabolic level, we are going to see reproductive impairment as well. And that's where we start to see the development of polycystic ovarian syndrome. So the thing about PCOS is once we develop it, we can keep it at bay, but we're always going to have it. Women have PCOS in menopause.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It just gets exacerbated when we start to see more metabolic changes. So as estrogen and progesterone begin to erratically decline, we are going to see metabolic compromise there as well. So it's no surprise that polycystic ovarian syndrome may rear its ugly head in peri again, even if you had it under control in your 20s and your 30s. Now, relative estrogen dominance or unopposed estrogen is happening often in early perimenopause, can happen in late peri, can also happen before as well. And what's happening there, 2 things typically. 1, progesterone is declining before estrogen. So it's usually in the luteal phase of our cycle where we'll see unopposed estrogen. I have to understand that when we're looking at progesterone, we're looking at 100 times more estrogen. Yes, estrogen has a little peak at day 21 of the luteal phase, but progesterone has a massive surge at day 21. Again, it's 100-to-1 ratio on average. As progesterone is declining and estrogen is still kind of sticking strong, it's erratic, but it's still holding on. She doesn't really start to decline closer to late on average. Everyone's a little bit different, but we will notice symptoms of relative estrogen dominance, which is bloating and weight gain and migraines and fibrocystic breast, heavy painful periods. Those are often the signs of estrogen dominance. This is usually because there's a there's the checks and balances are not being met between progesterone and estrogen in the luteal phase of our cycle. Remember, we don't make progesterone in the follicular phase of our cycle, not enough to even be significant. Estrogen is really ruling the roost there, and she's supposed to. So we don't really see a lot of these symptoms there. We see them in the luteal phase of our cycle. Lastly, the other thing that could be playing a role here with unopposed estrogen is the liver and the gut is compromised, which, let's be honest, in this modern day world, whose liver and gut isn't compromised? I was just staying I was in DC for a morning show yesterday, and I was staying at a Hilton. And I don't know why I thought, I'm just calling Hilton out right now because I don't care. And it's a brand new hotel. I walk in, and mind you, I have chronic migraines. I'm in perimenopause. My brain is massively remodeling. I am very sensitive to scent. Like, I'm always like crossing my fingers that the Lyft driver doesn't have plugins all over the car. And I walk into this Hilton and I am bombarded. I mean, they are pumping in
Purple.
just insane, nasty fragrance. I don't understand why. I really am struggling in a time where we have more endocrine disruptors than ever before. Why are we adding more to the mix? And it's in every elevator area. I go to the gym after my morning show segment to go work out really quickly before I have to head to the gym. And it's the worst in the gym. And I thought,
Wow.
let me see if I can make it at least 10 minutes in this gym. I don't. I make it like 9 minutes and I just take my workout upstairs. I do a body weight workout in my room and it's in my hair. It's so strong. And so I have a migraine today. I took medicine for it because of all of the scent exposure that I had yesterday at this freaking hotel. And so, I will say that the body is doing the best it can to mitigate this bombardment of toxic chemicals, but it's everywhere. And so the liver and the gut are definitely taking a hit. And so if the liver and the gut are not processing estrogen through the detox pathways, we will see a further buildup. So it's often progesterone is declining, the liver and gut don't have capacity to clear estrogen and xenoestrogens fast enough, and we get this buildup. Ultimately, we get these estrogen dominant symptoms. What I recommend is support the gut and liver and bring in oral micronized progesterone, like extra support. So I got home last night. I took glutathione. I took vitamin C. I took milk thistle. I'm doing it again today. I'm just going to bolster my system up as I'm just clearing all this crap from my travel.
Love it. And I think that's so important. I think, as you mentioned, like today's world, more importantly, we need to be supporting our detox pathways. And there's so many ways, simple ways, like you said. You mentioned a few, and then maybe dandelion tea is a simple other one. Do you have people go on DIM if they're really...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. DIM, calcium D-glutarate. I have a hormone supplement line called Essentially Whole, and it's built by me for women. And particularly when I was in my 30s, my late 30s, I had severe estrogen dominant symptoms. I was like, what is going on? And so this is when I built the product line. I was Hashimoto's, estrogen dominance, low progesterone. I was a hot mess. And so I have a hormone balance supplement that literally has broccoli seed extract, calcium D-glutarate, a little bit of DIM, vitamin C, all kinds of goodies that help chasteberry to really bolster up, ashwagandha, support women. It's called Hormone Balance. And the success that I've had, particularly with women in early perimenopause, late reproductive years because of estrogen dominance, it's been a game changer. So yeah, get whatever supplement works for you, but something that's got broccoli seed extract, calcium D-glutarate, good antioxidant vitamins like selenium, vitamin C, glutathione, and also things like milk thistle and DIM. DIM can get a bit challenging as we move into late perimenopause. Again, estrogen is ultimately going to decline. We can be in an estrogen dominant state halfway through our cycle for years. So if you are experiencing those symptoms, a lot of doctors will tell you they don't exist, but they do. They absolutely do. It's mind blowing to me. Like, I'm like, can the liver be compromised? Can the gut be compromised? And as a result, we have estrogen spillover. Can you be chronically constipated and have this estrogen spillover? Yes. A lot of doctors don't understand the mechanisms of the detox pathway, so they just don't get it. But I think it's always a good idea to support your liver and your gut, particularly when it comes to clearing hormones and clearing toxins. And estrogen, the thing about estrogen is you need to use it and lose it. You got to move it on through. And, in our pre-productive years, we're making it 24/7, and it is a game changer. And yes, in late perimenopause, it is significantly declining. And as a result, we lose bone, we lose muscle, our brain is massively remodeling. So we have to, it's really a Goldilocks situation where if you're relatively estrogen dominant in early perimenopause and late reproductive stage, take the supplements to support. And even on HRT, I still take a lot of these supplements because I want to make sure that I'm clearing my HRT estradiol, my what we call exogenous estradiol. Because, when I don't do that, especially my luteal phase, my boobs get lumpy and hard. I'm like, ooh, that's relative estrogen dominance. I'm not clearing it fast enough. So,
wow. So
just
good
know.
to know.
Yeah.
A big topic right now that you're seeing everywhere is women in perimenopause and taking peptides. So I'd love to talk about that. What is really working for people, for women in perimenopause when it comes to peptides?
Mm. And I will say that peptides aren't my 100% area of expertise. I mean, a lot of the women who come to me in my practice are using peptides to reduce inflammation,
Mm.
are using, and then also using peptides for weight resistance. And so usually some type of GLP-1 peptide. And a lot of my patients are also in my clinic on HRT and a GLP-1. And there's some really exciting preliminary research that combination can be so supportive. One of my favorite doctors who talks about this at length is going to be Dr. Tina Moore, who really talks about, a lot of her patients or the women in her community are on some microdosed GLP-1, and then they're also on hormone replacement therapy, particularly bioidentical estradiol. And so again, when we're talking about peptides, I want the one thing I want to make clear is that you want to be working with a provider that's getting medical grade peptides. I know that there's a lot of compounding pharmacists where you have to suspend them. You got to get, and those or it's like laboratory grade. I want to make sure that you know that those aren't necessarily the best grade to be using. Work with a provider that's actually prescribing them, that they're medical grade, and that really understands the nuance of using peptides. I recommend getting the foundational things in place first, the foundational pillars. I'm a big fan of not majoring in the minors. So start with the foundation, lock in the foundation, and then upgrade to hormone replacement therapy. And then once you get that stack dialed, then I would step into the world of peptides. So that would be my stack. Foundation
Perfect.
first, then HRT, and then peptides.
Perfect. Okay, so talking a little bit deeper about HRT before we close off. So I know the big thing is bioidentical.
Yes.
That's one thing I know we're advising everybody to get. But as far as HRT, would you say that, what would you say, what stage would somebody be put on HRT? Like what stage of perimenopause that they're like, okay, this is what I need?
This is a great question because this is, up until recently, we didn't think that women in perimenopause needed or should have hormone replacement therapy. And when we look at the US, it's only about 6% of women are on HRT currently. And I would say most of those are in menopause. So women in peri, we're still really missing the boat. We're not taking care of them the way that we should. We need to really update the standard of care for women. I say that the time to go on HRT in perimenopause is when the symptoms become so disruptive, it's disrupting your life and particularly your quality of life. And so for most women, that decline in progesterone is going to feel pretty significant in terms of your sleep, your mood, irritability, your rage. Most women come to me asking for HRT when they're experiencing rage, not weight resistance. That's when they're like, okay, I'm afraid my marriage is going to be, compromised. My relationships are compromised. I can't keep having this rage. So when the symptoms become that significant, low stress tolerance, irritability, loss of executive function, brain fog, sleep issues, that's the time to be having the conversation. Don't wait to get on HRT, especially oral micronized progesterone when you're dealing with those progesterone declining symptoms. For a lot of women, estrogen may be a couple of years out after that. It really just depends. So the stack typically looks like progesterone, estrogen, testosterone. But again, every woman's going to be different. Some women it's going to be progesterone, testosterone, estrogen. Some women it's going to be testosterone first. And then, but I would say that usually the stack is progesterone, estrogen, testosterone. For me, I was on progesterone first because of the brain-related symptoms were so severe. My progesterone levels had tanked. But it wasn't very long after, I would say a year later, that I was on estrogen. And how you'll know is that progesterone isn't, mind you, I was progesterone and all the lifestyle strategies still weren't addressing all of my symptoms. And my symptoms were significant that they were disruptive. So that's when I brought on estrogen. And I will say that even with all the HRT and all the lifestyle and even some peptides, that there's still, again, when the body is going through such a profound transition, you're still going to have days that are going to feel destabilizing. And so I wish I had the full protocol solution for women in perimenopause. I don't. I can clean up about 85% of it for most women most of the time. But there's going to be days when hormones are still erratic, receptor sites are not being bound to, and it's just going to feel like the life stress is just compounding on you. And that's where we just have to take time for ourselves, prioritize ourselves, and carve in more self-care. And I get how hard that is in a season of life where you are taking on the world because that's just what the world has asked of you. And you've just got to kind of figure out those moments of 5 to 10 minutes. And so that's very much been my own personal through line and journey, where most of the time I'm doing okay. But there are some days that no matter what I do, I feel like I'm barely crawling through mud.
Everybody hears you right now. I mean, there's definitely, everybody has those moments. And like you said, it's just really acknowledging it and honoring yourself in that time. I think that we have to give ourselves permission to possibly slow down, pause, rest, whatever it may be, just to honor ourselves.
Launch a book in perimenopause. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, that's great. Speaking of your book, Perimenopause Revolution. So is there anything you would like to share with women today that we missed so far to close off the episode?
Yes. The number one message I want women to know is that we get to decide. You get to decide. There's a big distinction between blaming ourselves, which the world has always told us that we need to blame ourselves for what we're experiencing. There's a big distinction between blaming ourselves and taking ownership. This is the window of opportunity. This is your metabolic window of opportunity to take ownership. And each and every one of us get to decide. We get to decide who we need to become in the second half of our lives. We get to decide what we want to prioritize in the second half of our lives. We get to set boundaries. We get to let go of things that are not serving us anymore. We get to be a full body yes to the things that feel alive. And we get to be a full body no to the things that are not supporting us further. So I just want you to know that this is not the beginning of the end. This is the beginning of you stepping into the most powerful, most resilient version of you in the next part of that life that you get to live. And it gets to be on your terms. And so I know that most of us have been told that it's the decline, that these are our least important years or least worthy years, and that nothing further from the truth is, I want you to know that you get to decide how it gets to be for you.
I love it. And that's the perfect way to end the episode. Oh my gosh, I love this conversation. I know it is so useful for so many women today. And yeah, I'm just so thankful to be able to learn so much more through, all the voices out there today that are speaking up for women. You're definitely one of those. So I thank you so much. Of course, your book will be plugged in the show notes. And you also have a podcast. What's your podcast called?
Erica, honey, it's called Energized with Dr. Mariza, because what woman doesn't want more energy? What woman doesn't want to feel more energized? And it's really about helping you navigate midlife on your terms and feeling powerful and resilient. So I cover all those topics and more twice a week on the show. Wow. The book is everywhere books are sold. I think by the time this goes out, but you can go and get all the bonuses, which is over $700 in bonuses at drmariza.com/book. That's drmariza.com/book. Go get your bonuses. And the book is on Audible. It's in ebook format, hardcover. Get in where you fit in. I'm an Audible girly myself. I love listening to books on Audible as a busy mom.
Aw, thank you so much for sharing all that. Of course, everything will be in the show notes. And I so appreciate you. Thank you so much for making this happen. And I will definitely talk to you soon.
Thanks, honey.